Okay, so here it says factor completely. So we're looking at this, we're trying to see what this they have in common, what multiples they have in common. And so z to the fifth power, what that means is that's just z being multiplied together 5 times, right? And so I'll just go ahead and write the whole thing here. And so I'm really kind of breaking this down, and then I'll kind of review how to kind of take it quickly in a moment. Then for the second term, that 15, we could break that into a 5 times 3, right? 5 times 3 is the same thing as 15. And then z to the fourth power is really, exponents are just telling you to multiply that base together that many times, so 4 times. So z gets multiplied z times z times z times z. And so factor completely, you're looking for the greatest common factor, or the greatest common factors in this case. So they both share the 3, so that's going to be part of my greatest common factor. And then if you look at the number of z's they have in common, so the first one has 5 and the second has 4. So you can say that they each have 4 z's, right? Or the easier way to write that is z to the power of 4. And that's the whole idea of exponents, is so that you don't have to write that out 4 times. You just write z to the power of 4. And so that's exactly what we're going to factor out of this. So we're going to factor out the 3z multiplied together 4 times, or raised to the power of 4. And what's going to be left inside the parentheses is what's not underlined, which would be a z in the front, and then plus, looks like just 5 right there. And that is our answer. That's the answer there. Now, that was a pretty detailed explanation. And so as you get more comfortable, you can kind of figure out the GCF by just kind of looking at it. So start with the numbers and be like, okay, basically what can divide into 3 and 15 evenly? And so that was 3, right? Then and so you gotta remember, it's called the greatest common factor. So what do they have in common here? And so that, sometimes you hear the word greatest, and so you're like, oh, z to the fifth power. That is the greatest one, but it's not the greatest that they have in common. And so what they have in common is a total of 4 of them, right? One of them has 5, one of them has 4. So what they have in common is 4. That's what the greatest amount they have in common. And so once you figure out that okay, that's the GCF, the greatest common factor, and then in your head, what you kind of do is undistribute it. You're kind of like basically dividing each term by that. And so if you were to divide this by 3z to the power of 4, you're just left with that z. And then 15 divided by 3 is going to be 5. And then z to the fourth divided by z to the fourth, basically it turns into a 1. Any value divided by itself is going to turn into a 1. So if you have z to the fourth divided by z to the fourth, really just kind of turns into a 1. But what happens is basically you're going to get 5 times 1, which is kind of silly. You don't really need to put 5 times 1. We just want to put the 5 there. So z plus 5. And so that's our answer. So they're kind of showing you every little detail. And then kind of, like I said, as you get more comfortable, you kind of just try to figure out that GCF in your head, and then go ahead and divide. You're basically dividing it out of the original expression.